Life on planet Earth has always been a delicate balancing act. Each inhabitant defined by their own impermanence. But humanity is accelerating that natural course to a crisis point. Scientists say we're in the midst of the 6th mass extinction, the first on this planet since the dinosaurs. Call to Earth guest editor Gerardo Garcia is battling that tide, trying desperately to pull creatures of all shapes and all sizes back from the point of no return. I'm Zain Asher, and this is Call to Earth, the edge of extinction. From majestic tigers and elephants to vast coral reefs and the vulnerable creatures that inhabit them, over 42,000 species are now considered under threat of extinction, according to the IUCN. But it's not just the revered and charismatic species at risk. Gerardo Garcia has dedicated his career to some of the animal kingdom's smaller and less acclaimed cast members. In a small collection of shipping containers just outside Chester Zoo in the UK, Gerardo is looking after a plethora of newts, frogs, salamanders, and snails. As head of ectotherms, he is in charge of nearly 60% of the animals in the entire zoo. Often, Gerardo is taking on species which have never been studied before. But in these pods, his team is able to recreate natural environments in a controlled setting to study biology, behavior, and crucially, breeding habits. All with the gold standard aim of reintroducing them to the wild.
Bermuda snails, in this case, what we tried at the beginning of the project is address about the longevity, the lifespan of the animals, number of clutches they can produce, the diet is required, the marking techniques, and that builds a full portfolio, a great toolbox of conservation that it helps when our partners are developing the best habitat in the wild to release them back.
Since 2013, Gerardo has carried out much of his fieldwork in Bermuda with 2 native species of snail, the greater and lesser Bermudan land snails.
So here they are.
This is the ones that are going to Bermuda?
So yeah, lesser Bermuda snails on this side.
But the ones you selected for the trip?
Yes, so which I selected, they are here, and we checked them, they're all fine, all ready to go.
And we're going to have 3,000?
Yes, 3,000 is all.
A mix between adults and juveniles?
Yep.
Having grown up in the containers at Chester Zoo, the snails are now making the 3,000-mile journey to Bermuda, where wildlife ecologist Mark Outerbridge is waiting for them.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. All right?
Yeah, absolutely. Bermuda's biodiversity has its roots, its origins with many other islands. So we're talking about a relatively small land area, and in Bermuda's case, a very small land area in the middle of the ocean. And before humans arrived, plants and animals would have had to come here under natural processes, which limits what can actually make the journey. And unfortunately, we have evidence that we have lost species in Bermuda. They are extinct. One of my main roles in this job is to try and prevent further extinctions. I started with about 80-odd species. The list has now grown to over 300 that are on the protected species list.
One of those species is the greater Bermudan land snail, which is not only critically endangered, but was believed to be extinct for over 15 years. That was until 2014, when a member of the public walked into Mark's office with a shell of the endemic snail.
He took me to the alleyway in Hamilton, the capital city of Bermuda. In my mind, it was the absolute definition of a concrete jungle. It was a very narrow alleyway, it was very dark. They had been living there unnoticed for presumably decades. And then the right man at the right time knew exactly what he was looking at, and that is really what sparked this whole conservation project off.
Starting with only 60 of those snails, Gerardo's team has since bred and released more than 100,000, one of the biggest wildlife reintroductions in history. Now he is returning to one of the release sites, Trunk Island, to check on their progress and work out if the area will be suitable for releasing their smaller cousins.
Gentlemen.
Hello!
Hello, Trevor.
Trevor Rawson is the conservation manager for Trunk Island, which has become a living classroom for students to study and restore Bermuda's native flora and fauna.
You cannot save a fauna species without saving the habitat that surrounds it. You need to have the habitat in order to encourage that species to grow. You cannot grow that in an invasive covered habitat with introduced plants because it does not know how to thrive in that. You need to give it the space and the refuge that it can to survive. We've dug out all the Brazil pepper and a lot of the non-native species and planted all the native species that you see around us. So in the hopes that we kind of get as close as we can to what the original settlers would have seen in the 1600s, even 1500s when they arrived in Bermuda, pre-human interaction with the environment here.
This is what is the beauty of this work between working at the zoo and working the team here on the government, working with the habitat. So it's almost a synchronization of the activities. Both that we have to just get the thumbs up and say, habitat is ready, we minimize the threats, these predators are gone, let's have a go. Was it this, the first spot?
So this was the first spot we ever
Right.
released the snails. So we brought a bunch of palm fronds here because we saw how much they were feeding off palm fronds on Ports Island, sorry. So far, so good. Let's see if we can find any.
Yeah, I can see one right now.
You see one there?
A careful rummage through the fallen palm leaves reveals a thriving community of the greater Bermudan land snails and indicates a perfect location to release the lesser snails.
Okay, let's see how they did the trip. So the adults on the top.
How long have they been in this box? It's over a day, hasn't it?
Over the day, with the whole trip, but buffering the temperature just will be great.
Yeah.
And you see they're active, so that means that they didn't have any extreme temperatures of too cold, too hot. So that's
very
pretty good. So in total, we have 1,000 adults
And it was 2,000 juveniles, yes?
and 2,000 juveniles. So we have
3,000 snails in this box.
Using thermal camera technology, Gerardo is able to identify the perfect cool, humid conditions for the snails to survive.
18, and you see really quick. Many people would ask, why to bother about snails? And the question is, why we bother about any other species that we have on the planet? Every single one, animal and plants, every single one has a role to play. We don't know, we may don't understand, we may underestimate the role, but everybody has a very important ecological role. But one of them is degrading all the materials. They need it. That is part of the ecosystem. You remove that piece on the system and it's not working functionally correct. So today may not perceive the snails is important, but it's as important for any other species that we have in the planet. When we started the program with the Bermuda snails at the zoo, we were just right at the edge of the extinction of the species. That's as close as we were. Today we can say that this is a process of recovery. We're going in the right direction.
Gerardo Garcia's conservation work has taken him to some peculiar places. From saving salamanders in a monastery in Mexico to toads in the mountain waterfalls of Java. And the creatures he cares for range from some of the gentlest on the planet to some of the most ferocious.
Now we're working with the largest, biggest lizard on the planet with the Komodo dragons. We have just coming back from Indonesia and had the opportunity to see the dragons in all the different islands with similar kind of threats. But the most incredible thing is about the people working and dedicating basically their lives to protect them.
With a family of Komodo dragons at Chester Zoo, Gerardo's team is raising awareness about the species' battle for survival and learning things about the animals that can't be observed in the wild.
This island, with probably no more than 1,000 Komodo dragons there, they are really in severe decline. And that is where I think zoos can make it a difference.
For Gerardo, the research process is even more intensive for one of the world's rarest and most elusive lizards, the Bermuda skink.
It's a small lizard, probably around 20 plus centimeters, short legs, very slimy, very fast, very secretive. Pretty much sure that if you come to Bermuda, you won't see it. When we start working with these species, it was very little known about the biology, a part of knowing they're pretty much active all year around. We didn't know about what is the differences between males and females. We didn't know how they breed. We don't know about numbers of individuals, the population, how they mate, what is the courtship. All this information that is vital to take the right direction to protect the species.
The solution was to set up a Big Brother-style camera system in the zoo, closely monitoring every movement of the skinks and breeding them for reintroduction in Bermuda.
When we were looking for these females and if they're breeding, every single time we lift the rock, we see a female curling around the eggs. But this hasn't been seen in the wild. These animals live in the limestones, under the crevices. You don't see clutches of eggs. So only when you have animals here in a very intensive care at the zoo, we're able to really understand all these gaps of understanding of the biology of the species, which it feeds back to how to monitor the species back in the wild in Bermuda.
Rats, cats, and other invasive species have nearly wiped out the skink population on the mainland. But on several of the smaller satellite islands, a tiny population of around 1,500 individuals remain.
There are hundreds of nearshore islands that form this sort of satellite chain around the main islands. Some of them are inhabited, some of them are not. Our most important ones are in Castle Harbor Islands Nature Reserve, just off the airport. They form a string of about 12 islands, which are still largely very natural. They've really become our life rafts for species that are becoming threatened in ways that we can't control on the main island.
Gerardo and his colleague Mark Outerbridge are setting traps across the Castle Harbor Islands with the hope of verifying the size of the surviving skink population.
What we aim to do is set the jar at a good 45-degree angle so that when the skinks come to the edge and then actually commit to going in, when the time comes for them to leave, they can't get back out. They don't have sticky pads on their hands, they actually have claws, which are absolutely useless against the slippery sides of the glass.
The jars are set along the cliffs of Nonsuch Island, close to one of the skink's favorite delicacies.
First night we will start catching up. Remember that we see the skinks with a red face and it's dripping, and we're thinking, oh my God, what they feeding on, dead chicks or
That's right.
predating.
Yeah.
And in fact we find out that it was
It's
the
fruit of the prickly pear cactus. And it's a native species. It's very common in the coastal areas. Skinks have obviously learned to exploit it.
1 hour later, and it's time to check on the traps.
How many there are? 2 there? 1 there. Oh yes, we got one.
You found one, G?
Yeah. Good.
Very nice. Let's have a look.
Look at yours.
Oh, it's a lovely one.
It's an adult.
It is.
It's been 6 years.
It has been since the last skink survey. It's been 6 years. That's
So
right.
6 years, the population is still here. And that's good.
All right.
Let's have a quick look and take some measurements first. Oh, very nice.
Very good.
Good adult. Perfect tail, huh?
I know. No scarring.
No scarring, no bites.
No. Looks like it's got all its fingers and toes. Should we get a total
Try-
length?
Yeah, got total length now. Right.
You want the 0 there?
Yeah. and it has no loss of tail, no mutilation.
Over on Castle Island, 2 more skinks, including a juvenile, an encouraging sign that the colony is continuing to reproduce.
Gerardo is a fascinating man to talk to. He has this wealth of information, these experiences that he brings with him from a wide range of animals in a wide range of environments. I don't think anyone can really ever retire and feel like, whew, don't have to worry about these animals anymore. I think, they're always going to be fragile. It's just the degree of fragility. I think as long as you can feel that you were a helpful contributing factor to their slow progression away from the wall of extinction, maybe they're just now near threatened. Well, that's good enough. These creatures deserve to be here certainly as much as we do.
Right, but that's fantastic news. 6 years later, this population is still here in Nonsuch. Let's put it back. Take its time.
For species on the brink of extinction, small and uninhabited islands can be a safe haven, free from human activity and difficult for invasive predators to reach. Isolated in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, Bermuda is surrounded by hundreds of these tiny satellite islands, providing a crucial safety net for native species. Call to Earth guest editor Gerardo Garcia is on Nonsuch Island to monitor Bermuda's native lizard, the skink.
The older ones, it's not as much of a problem because...
But today he has joined the island's caretaker, Jeremy Medeiros, to see how another of Bermuda's rare endemic species is developing.
Would you be able to take notes?
Yeah, oh my God. Am I going to destroy your database now?
No.
In 5 minutes.
I have confidence in you. Okay, here we go. So it's about 75 days old, 78 days old now. And it'll fledge at about 90 to 100 days. Hey there, matey. So, yep. So here he is. He's still in very much, his shedding is down like mad right now. You can see it's just blowing
This
off.
is a cahal, a nocturnal seabird. And just like the Bermuda land snails, it is a Lazarus species, risen from the dead. It once numbered in the hundreds of thousands, but the cahal population was wiped out after human settlement in the early 1600s, and the species was presumed extinct for 300 years. Then, in 1951, a group including acclaimed ornithologist Robert Cushman Murphy and a 15-year-old Bermuda schoolboy, David Wingate, made a dramatic discovery on a tiny rock in the middle of the ocean.
Being young, of course, I was able to bend over and look into crevices a little easier than the others. And about half an hour into our search, we found what was obviously an occupied burrow, and we actually found 3. I'll never forget when the bird was extracted, handed to Murphy with his typical New England accent. By gad, the cahal. And so you can imagine what the effect on all of us was. I mean, here we were rediscovering a bird which was thought extinct 300 years ago.
From that moment on, David has devoted his life to protecting the cahals, creating artificial burrows to keep out the aggressive white-tailed tropic birds. But hurricanes posed a significant threat to the cahal habitats, and it became clear something more would need to be done if they were to survive.
I recognized quite early, due to the size of the islands, that we were going to have to get them onto a larger island if they were ever going to really increase at all. And even by then, the issue of sea level rise was coming. And 2 of these islands could be overwashed completely when you get a bad hurricane. So it was a pretty critical situation.
The solution, build a new home on the larger and safer Nonsuch Island, and hope that the Cahao colony would be enticed to make the move.
I think when I first started working with David in the 1980s, there were at that point around about 30 pairs. When he retired and I took over the program, I think they were up to 53 pairs at that point. And now this year, 2023, they reached 164 breeding pairs, which sounds wonderful, but it's still a really, really tiny population. It's a hopeful trend, it's very encouraging, but plainly recovery work and management work is going to need to continue for the foreseeable future for them to continue their increase. Nonsuch has the capacity, we think, for 5,000 to 6,000 pairs just on it. But now you can see his wingspans expanding, he's developing all of his flight feathers. You take over as the foster parent. You feed them daily, you weigh them, you measure them, give them vitamins. The last week before they depart, they come out every night because they're a nocturnal seabird, and they imprint on that area. They go to high points and they look around, and it's like they're memorizing exactly where they are on the planet.
When the chicks finally take flight, they stay out at sea for 3 to 5 years. But Jeremy is already seeing the results of the translocation.
105 birds I moved over 5 years, 50% of them returned to Nonsuch. And it was such a relief because I had sleepless nights.
There isn't any other species that I can think of that has gone from such rarity to such rapid increasing. We have no excuse not to use all these tools for conservation, because it's a matter of life and death, not for us, but for the planet.
So I'm just going to take a quick weight check first.
This bird is a clear example that sometimes we have to accept it, that Mother Nature won't be strong enough and able enough to recover itself. By having that intensive care and looking for every single bird, it gives you the proof that you can really reverse the threat. So you can see now a recovery of the species. The numbers are increasing. Second generation of birds coming back and nesting by themselves. And now probably Mother Nature can start taking over and follow up.
Scientists like David, Jeremy, Mark, and Gerardo are the last line of defense for these amazing species. And without their intervention, many of the animals would be lost forever.
The magnitude of endangered species is huge. We're talking about probably 1 million species that are threatened. Pretty much every single group of animal plants are threatened. There's nothing where you can hide. These species are absolutely in decline. Every single species, the Bermuda skinks, the greater Bermuda snails, the lesser Bermuda snails, cahows, all of them play a very important role in the whole ecosystem. That's why they're here. That's why they needed to interconnect with each other. They needed each other. We may don't know the complexity of the inside of these species, but it doesn't matter what it is for the human eyes. Every single species is absolutely vital if we wanted to preserve the long-term biodiversity.